Hello and welcome to The Pulse. Given that some Hong Kong officials seem to operate under the assumption that the only good tree is a dead one and regard nature as something that obstructs development, Hong Kong is lucky to have so much of its landmass covered by country parks. Mind you, some of them only exist because they're on slopes that defy building construction. Now, however, the government thinks the time has come to start nibbling away at those country parks. More on that in part 2. But first, pride goes before a fall, as the old British saying goes. And in April, after vowing on several different occasions that she wasn't going to call a snap election, UK Prime Minister Theresa May, well, called a snap election. At the time, her Conservative Party was riding high in opinion polls. She figured that there was little to fear from the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, and that a stronger mandate in the form of a tighter grip on Parliament would improve her ability to negotiate Brexit. But it hasn't worked out as planned. Indeed, hasn't worked out big time.
The results are in, and the news is not good for the Conservative Party or UKIP or for the Scottish National Party, with both Labour and the Liberal Democrats winning seats at their expense. While the Conservative Party still has the largest number of seats in the House of Commons, it has lost its previous overall majority and will be forced to look to other parties for support. For Theresa May, who called the election only because she thought she could easily achieve a much stronger mandate, the snap election was a hugely unsuccessful gamble.
As we ran this campaign, we set out to consider the issues that are the key priorities for the British people. Getting the Brexit deal right, ensuring that we both identify and show how we can address the big challenges facing our country, doing what is in the national interest. That is always what I have tried to do in my time as a Member of Parliament.
We have a situation now where hopefully, maybe, politicians may learn that calling referendums and general elections to suit your party rather than suiting the country is something to be avoided.
The Prime Minister called the election because she wanted a mandate. Well, the mandate she's got is lost Conservative seats, lost votes, lost support and lost confidence. I would have thought that's enough to go, actually, and make way for a government that will be truly representative of all of the people of this country.
In the run-up to the vote, many polls had shown that Labour was eating away at the Conservative majority, particularly after Tory U-turns on taxing the elderly, widely labelled a dementia tax, and on subsidising more public housing. The U-turns also dented what many saw as May's empty rhetoric of strong and stable government, which they found little more convincing than Brexit is Brexit. A final Congress poll released the night before the election seemed to give Conservatives and the Britain's right-wing media some hope, predicting May would win the biggest Tory landslides since Margaret Thatcher. Instead, she is facing a serious reduction of her mandate. May's position was not helped by terrorist attacks in Manchester and London. Critics immediately pointed out that she had, as Home Secretary, cut police budgets by 18% and removed 20,000 police officers from the force. Even without the threat of terrorism, the Conservative Party likely misjudged the mood of the general public. Both the Brexit referendum and the ascendance of Donald Trump in the United States strongly suggested that many are tired of politics as usual. In the UK, this is especially true of the younger generation. More than 1 million people under 25, many of whom had been denied a vote on Brexit, registered to vote on the run-up to the election. The overall turnout was significantly higher than in 2015. That also proved significant in denting the Conservative majority.
Well, with me in the studio is Kenneth Chan, Associate Professor in the Department of Government and International Studies at the Hong Kong Baptist University. Kenneth Chan, your main area of study is European politics.
Indeed.
How does this election in Britain fit into the what's happening generally in Europe? I mean, we've had elections in France, in Austria, elections are coming up in Germany. Where do you see this one fitting into all of that?
Steve, I can almost hear all the way from Brussels people laughing out loud at the results of this slap elections called by Theresa May. She wanted, as you said, strong, stable leadership, and she didn't get it. I think people of the UK decided that in times of uncertainty, they need more time, room for different political parties to chip in, to have more ideas, to make sure that the transition from the EU to the wilderness will be calm and steady. It's not a time for Theresa May, for the Conservative Party, to try to play tricks with this situation by getting more votes and getting more seats to become more
You think
draconian.
The election was a sort of trick,
so
do you?
it was widely interpreted as an attempt by Theresa May to enhance the Conservative Party's vote shares and seats share. This is wrong, and this is all wrong. And during the elections, of course, during the campaign, you see that Theresa May basically refused to take part in televised debate, and she came up with some controversial ideas, such as slashing or reforming social care. And as a result of 2 attacks, one in Manchester and the second one in London, she again caught another controversy by enhancing or calling for the enhancement of the powers for the ministers at the expense of the police and so on and so forth. So she made a series of tactical mistakes, and as a result, we probably end up having a smaller Tory majority in the House of Commons.
I'm just wondering how you see this election in Britain fitting into the pattern of other European elections. I mean, what people are saying is the populist tide in Europe has receded with the election of Macron in France, the defeat of the extreme right in Holland. Do you see anything in the British election about that?
I think in general populism is on the rise. Although we can't see very well in the recent elections, first of all in the French presidential one and now in the UK parliamentary one, but there's a strong populist current across the European Union. The thing is, at the end of the day, populists, they never intend to govern. They never intend to run the business seriously. So I think many of the populists, for example, in this particular case, the UK election, UKIP, the UK Independent Party, decided rather to collaborate with the Conservatives across the nation instead of striking out and telling people how they are going to make Brexit a success. A lot of people feel very uncomfortable, uncertain about the prospects after Brexit. And now the Conservative Party or the future Conservative government with a smaller majority will have to struggle during the negotiations with the European Union.
I mean, some people argue that in fact that the relative strength of the Labour vote under Jeremy Corbyn is also a reflection of a surge of populism, in the sense that, you know, I mean, obviously he was quite radical. Secondly, he seemed to be reflecting a mood of anti-government hatred or whatever. I wonder if that's also a feature here.
Well, there's an element of protest in all elections, and it so happened that the Labour Party is the major opposition party, with Jeremy Corbyn being the leader. But to be honest, looking objectively, no one seems to be thinking about Jeremy Corbyn being the next Prime Minister or being able to form a government, stable government, and implement ideas. So for the time being, you see some sort of polarization in politics during election times. We always have that element of polarization. But I think at the end of the day, what you've got in the UK is that people are very concerned about the future of the UK and Brexit and the volatility. And I think they would like rather to see all these political parties try to work together to execute Brexit in a way that would really put people's collective interest rather than partisan interest first.
Well, that's not going to happen, is it?
Well, it's going to happen one way or another, because the election is giving us a very strong signal that people in the UK do not want any single one of the political party to be the only representative of the nation. There will be a lot of controversies and arguments and debates ongoing, and it would only increase as Britain begins the negotiation with the EU. It's going to be a very tough negotiation one way or another.
And one of the things that the people who are keen on Brexit say is it gives Britain a fantastic opportunity to go to the wider world, not just to Europe, and they've been looking particularly at this part of the world, particularly to China. Do you actually think that's a realistic prospect, that China is that interested in having enhanced relations with Britain?
People who campaign for Brexit, of course, would like to hold up some sort of prospects or promises, and yet none of these have been substantiated. You can see that the Conservative government has been trying to go around the world to strike deals with India, with China, and there's been talks about Britain having to work out schemes and trade programs with even Hong Kong, because the trade flows between Britain and the EU, which amounted to about 40%, 50% at the moment, definitely come down. So they have to look for new markets, they have to look for new opportunities. So this is saying that, okay, we welcome Britain to China, welcome Britain to Hong Kong, but whether or not there would be, the kind of fruits that the Brexit people promised remains to be seen. But one thing for sure, with Brexit, trade and services between the UK and the rest of the EU would be going down drastically.
Well, Kenneth Chan, thank you very much indeed, and we'll be back after the break. We'll see you then. Welcome back. Do birds excrete in trees? Yes, they do. Well, that's assuming they can find any foliage in Hong Kong's urban areas, which brings us to complaints about bird droppings and potential falling branches that led to a tree being pruned this week in Tai Po. This area also happens to be the second largest habitat for egrets, and the tree pruning resulted in deaths and injuries to several hatchlings. Generally speaking, however, the government is not that worried about trees, but as we've discovered, not all trees are equal. When the chief executive was asked why country parks could be used to develop housing while golf courses and the chief executive's lodge in Fanling could not, Leung Chun-ying said it would be difficult as these places are home to decades-old trees. That's a bit strange because last time I looked, the country parks also seem to be pretty full of old trees. However, this has done little to dampen the outgoing chief executive's determination to eat into the country parks.
It was in September 2013 that the then Development Secretary Paul Tran first suggested examining the possibility of developing parts of Hong Kong's country parks. 2 years later, in November 2015, the Hong Kong Foundation, headed by former Chief Executive Tung Chee-hwa, also suggested reviewing the ecological value and purpose of country parks as part of a wider strategy on housing. The very next day, Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying went on record to support the idea. He raised it again in his once-on policy address in January this year. In May, the government commissioned the non-profit Hong Kong Housing Society to study the feasibility of developing land on the periphery of country parks in Tai Lam Country Park in Yuen Long and in Ma On Shan Country Park near Shei Chun O Estate.
Actually, I agree with it because some people are waiting for the flats around here. We have to wait for housing 7 years or above.
如果你喺上面再起啊，水田口嗰度啊再起啊，好大鑊㗎喎，喺個山頂上邊。點大鑊法咧？交通咯，你呢條係必經之路嚟啦。
The timing of Leung Chun-ying's commissioning of the Hong Kong Housing Society study, with just a month and a half left to go in office, also raised eyebrows. In 2015, Paul Tran had promised that the government would not move to develop country parks before its term ended in 2017. The study paves the way for, or perhaps puts pressure on, the incoming administration of Carrie Lam.
事實上就係繞過咗，令到佢唔需要受呢個即係立法會嘅監察啦。佢唔需要經一個立法會嗰個財委會嘅撥款去攞到一啲公帑去做，係啦，直接就可以揾一個體制以外嘅團體，佢就可以進行呢個研究。
No person saying that
we are going to circumvent all these procedures, we are going to circumvent all these necessary statutory processes. No, it's not the case. It is actually a kick-off exercise to enable rational and pragmatic debate in society, after which you still have to go through all the necessary statutory and non-statutory processes and procedures to get the things approved.
At the end of May, more than 10 green groups hiked Tai Lam Chong Country Trail to oppose government encroachment on the parks.
咁你個生態環境嘅話咧，你都鏟晒，到第時就冇啦。如果冇咗之後嘅話咧，咁你個環境就好似骨牌咁樣推落去啦，推到咧去大堂嗰度嘅欣賞紅葉嗰度咧，都可能慢慢推咧，都冇咗噶啦。另外呢度咧，我哋企緊嘅位置咧，其實係集水區嚟嘅，下面山坡下面有引水道嚟嘅，就啲水就流落去大欖涌水塘嘅，咁亦都係對我哋嘅供水啊，都有一個影響喺度嘅。
Water catchment areas in which rainwater for the waterworks is collected are protected under the Waterworks Ordinance Cap 102. Developments of these areas is discouraged. As most such areas overlap country parks, they also fall under the protection of the Country Parks Ordinance. Under Section 10 of that ordinance, enacted in 1976, no new development shall be carried out within the area of the proposed country park without the prior approval of Agriculture, Fisheries and Conservation Departments or AFCD.
政府咧就話要發展郊野公園邊陲嘅地方，咁我估好多人咧就理解唔到嘅，就係純粹以為係郊野公園外邊嘅邊陲嚇，但係佢其實冇一個好具體嘅定義嘅。 我哋本土研究社可能呢幾年咧都做咗好多一啲土地嘅調查啦，即係睇下究竟成個香港究竟有幾多土地嘅存量其實未被善用、未被使用嘅。咁我哋計下一啲例如閒置地啊、短租地啊，同埋近年政府先覺得係一啲土地資源嘅棕地咧，呢一啲土地嘅資源其實加埋都上幾千公頃。
Many of these brownfield sites are actually occupied by small and medium-sized enterprises, whether it's for recycling plants, whether it's for vehicle repair. We have to find ways and means to reaccommodate, to resettle all these business operations. We have looked at about something like 170 hectares of land, which is at the periphery of and inside the country park boundary of the Tai Lam Country Park. It is adjacent to existing infrastructure. It is very close to transport facilities. It is close to a new development area of Campton South. The development costs will be much more economical. The development time will be much shorter.
There's little doubt that more housing is needed in Hong Kong as the population grows. But Wang Fuk Yi, a former assistant director of AFCD, who worked in planning and managing country parks for more than 30 years, disagrees that they should bear the brunt of that development.
We designate most of the countryside, but leaving aside some buffer areas between the town and the country parks. These buffer zones, some of them have become the brownfield land. Some of them were under the ownership of some landlords or some property developers. So I think the government should contact and discuss with all these landowners and see whether there's some sort of cooperation between them and the government in order to resolve the land shortage problem.
Wang Fuk Yi played a part in constructing trails in a number of country parks, including Tai Lam Chong from the 1970s onwards. Currently, there are 24 country parks and 22 special areas that cover 40% of Hong Kong's land. The first Hong Kong country parks was established in 1977, 40 years ago. During the 1960s, the Hong Kong government had invited ecology expert Lee Tapboyd and his wife Martha Tapboyd to evaluate the Hong Kong countryside and considered how to protect it. In his Conservation of the Hong Kong Countryside summary report and recommendation, Tai Po suggested a park system and nature conservancy council should be established as soon as possible. He also foresaw a time when the parks would be put under threat.
The maximum possible degree of permanency is needed for park systems. There is little purpose in investing in a park system, which will be destroyed bit by bit as political and economic pressure increases on individual administrators or government departments. I think this is quite valid because we can foresee there will be pressures on other users of the park area in future. Now it comes after about 50 years, we are facing economic and political pressure in developing country parks.
Well, that's it from us for this week. We'll leave you with some not very pleasant images of the tragically inept ways that the government deals with nature. Luckily, there are no endangered species at the Pulse. So we'll be back at the same time next week. Until then, goodbye.
We come from the brink of destruction. God